Hello, dear listeners. As we head into the heart of summer, I wanted to offer you something a little different. A chance to pause, reflect, and find fresh inspiration. Because summer is not just about rest, it can be also about reconnecting with what really matters. In this special bonus episode, I've gathered powerful moments from past conversations on a Positive Leadership podcast. Voices that remind us of what it means to lead with purpose beyond profit. From the Amazon rainforest to the Paris Agreement, from inclusive finance to earthquake recovery, each story you'll hear today is a masterclass in bold, values-driven leadership. So whether you're listening from a quiet beach, a shady garden, or on your way to your next adventure, take a deep breath and let's dive in. Let's start with a powerful example of corporate leadership aligned with both people and the planet. And so let's dig into this extract from my conversation with Fábio Barbosa, former CEO of Banco Real and now at the helm of Natura & Co. Fábio has successfully combined business achievement with social impact all along his career. In this excerpt, he shares his unique perspective on integrating ethics and sustainability into the business world. It's an inspiring testimony on how a responsible approach can transform not only a company, but also society. Take a listen. Under leadership, Banco Real underwent a significant transformation, including a major merger all the way to with Santander. And as a leader, you are committed to shaping a corporate culture that emphasize social responsibility. So I'd love you to love for our listeners as well to understand when and why you came up again with this leadership philosophy, right? Which at the time was not necessarily, I think, a core belief of the banking system, neither in Brazil nor elsewhere in the world, the US, even in Europe. So when and why did it come to you as something quite existential for the bank?
So that's an interesting question. So remember, I mentioned right quickly, I was working in Switzerland and I decided to resign. And I said, I work in finance, so why don't I work in a company where finance is central? Which is not the case for Nestlé, of course, which is a fantastic company. But then I said, why don't I go to the bank? So I went to a bank initially for Citibank for a few years. And then I joined a bank called ABN AMRO Bank, which still exists there in Holland.
Yes.
And I knew, and I was very fortunate because the bank made an important acquisition here at Banco Real. At Citibank, I had a lower position. I was always called the Swiss. There comes the Swiss. I was there always on time. I was always doing my obligation. But at that time, I was proud of doing that. Different from university when I was hiding that, because I did not want people to know. There I was proud. But I did not have the power. When I went to ABN AMRO and soon became the president there, I said, okay, now remember, ethics is my mainstream. And then I said one sentence which really guides my life, which is, you can succeed doing the right things the right way. And in the world, Brazil as well, but I think in the world, that people believe that if you don't compromise, you cannot get things done. You know how things are, and I am totally against. By the way, I don't know how to compromise. I probably would do it badly. I would be caught or whatever. I don't know how to. So I want to bring the game to my field. And then I said, okay. And then I start saying that, and a group of people came to me, and so ethics was my issue. And then I said, okay, what does it mean? I said, let's discuss that. What does it mean? And we started discussing, for instance, and it was called social responsibility at the time.
Yes, at the time, yes.
The word sustainability did not exist. Social responsibility. Say, okay, I'm not in the business of giving money away, which says, trying to put in English, in Portuguese it sounds better, but in English more or less, I do not want to write something on the check to erase my consciousness. So I give some money and I'm clean. Okay, no, I'm a nice guy. I gave here $1 million, whatever. And that's not my. What do we do? And then somebody came and they said, what does it mean? So it started with a very simple situation. We were financing a company which was unduly cutting woods in the south of Brazil, not in the Amazon. And then I said, we should not lend them money. No, why not? Because number one, it's not correct. It's illegal. At that time, it's not even talking about it's not good for the world. Just illegal. It was illegal. And said, I said, forward looking, do you think the guy will be there 5, 10 years from now to pay us back? He'll not be. Look at that. Then a second case showed, and I also cut the credit according to this group of 5 people, which are not my direct reports necessarily, but
Yeah.
the ones believed on that. And then I cut. And then people came to me and say, you are going to ruin the bank. The bank is going to have a problem. And, so, and again, it's the third time I'm going to say that life was kind to me. But
Yeah.
a guy called me from the Northeast and saying, listen, I have a client here. He has a certified wood company here in the northeast of Brazil.
Nordeste. Mm-hmm.
Nobody ever cared about that. He heard that Banco Real is looking into it. He would like to do business with us. And I said, okay, now is my redemption. There is business to be done with people who have share the same values. And then it started. I said, okay, now I'm in the game. We are going to work with a part of the population which believes that to succeed doing the right things the right way is the way to work. So
It's
very, very strict.
Yeah, it's a very interesting story. In many ways, I mean, it seems at the time, which was a few decades ago, right, that in a way you set up the rules of what is called today compliance, right? Compliance, chief compliance officers, committees, because today it seems like impossible to fraud, right? As a bank, and you see all the controls on your customer, etc. I mean, there's a bunch of controls, especially in Europe, but globally. So at the time, there was not such controls at all in banks. Can you confirm? It was kind of Wild West. It looks like
it was in 1996, so it's like almost 30 years ago. And I was actually there was a magazine. I was the cover of the magazine, and they used to call the Green Banker. But that was a little bit of irony, making it ridiculous.
Yes,
This guy here thinking about that. Me just a second here.
Yeah.
Thinking about, okay, this guy is paying attention to things that he should not be paying attention, what is going on. And so it was very, very, let's say, ridicularizing, really making it fun out of me. And then I said, forward looking, this is the way to do it. I'm convinced. Also, I have to say, a little bit selfish, if I may say, because that's the business I know how to do. Say, when people are too smart, I'm not good on that. But if the situation gets on the table, everything with transparency, then I'm good at. And so I said, if you don't believe in my good ideas and good values, just think on my selfishness. I want things to be the game to be on my court. And that's the game I know how to play. And just to say, it went at a point in time, Jean-Philippe, we had 51 initiatives. I didn't even know them anymore because it's spread out. And I found that there are more people in companies which are willing to do the things properly than people which are trying to compromise here and there. So it became a reference.
No, it's wonderful. It's wonderful to start again with that sense of integrity, this sense of ethics you mentioned, Fabio, in the last couple of questions. And you've been also known, and I'd like to extend the question now, of course, for prioritizing social issues, right, through business goals. And you mentioned in interviews that the idea that profits and sustainability can coexist together, it's not something that was necessarily easily acceptable, I think, by your colleagues at the time in the 90s or early 2000s. So how did you push this new narrative and this new philosophy into the bank to go beyond ethics into societal issues, and how to balance that while obviously you are accountable as a CEO to deliver financial results? Of course, you are not exempted from that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I made lots of presentations to the team and so on. It's amazing within the bank because somebody told me, let's talk to 5,000. We had 25,000 employees at that time. Let's talk to make a big set. There was no communication like today. Okay. I said, I don't want that. I want to start little by little. So I started making this. And there was something which I said, it's a false dilemma. The idea that either you make money or you do things looking to the externalities or the impact you cause, is a false dilemma. It's a world of and not a world of or. And so I started with that and said, this is just good business I'm talking about. So, for instance, in the case of the forest, which I mentioned, it's good business. There was another one, which was a guy which was fishing shrimps, and but it was badly done. I said, how can we do this guy? Why don't we help him and tell something which is a sustainable fishing of shrimps, and instead of the way he's doing, which is going to end up his business on its own. So we went there and financed a specialist to teach him on how to do it. I said, this is good business for everybody. So it started with that. And
Yes.
also we were fortunate because the results of the bank was going up because we got a tremendous attachment, especially by the young people, which said, this bank shares some values that I want to do. So we started going to things, reducing consumption of water. That's natural. Looking at the recycling garbage, that's no problem. Reducing consumption of energy or going for clean energy. I mean, that does not cause any problem for the bank. I
Yeah.
don't see. I see a false. There are true dilemmas, and I can get some, but these are
Yeah.
dilemmas.
Please.
And I'll get in a moment. The
Yeah.
second one went into the social issues, and I said, I believe a lot in diversity, but I'm very careful. A moment ago, I was explaining here to another group diversity of points of view. That's what I'm after.
Yes.
I'm not after to comply with social pressures to have diversity, ethics, and ethnics, and so on.
Yes.
People with different background, people with social background, people with another race
Yeah.
or another social, sexual orientation, whatever it is, they have different points of view, and that's
Yeah.
what I'm after. So I'm not
Yeah.
after just for the sake of it. And normally,
Yes.
Jean-Philippe, I put just an object in front of me here and say, listen, the best way to describe this is to have different points of view. If you have everybody on the same side, you cannot describe a problem. So I
Yeah.
said, diversity is not an obligation. Diversity can enhance the decision-making process. That's why I work with diversity. And by the way, although the company was making donations here, I never wanted to do that. I agree with Milton Friedman. That's to be done by the shareholder, not by the company. But the company has to do its business properly. So I dared to adjust Milton Friedman's thought and saying
Yes.
the business of business is sustainable business. And that
Yes.
actually is very important because that's what he meant. I'm not in the, as a CEO, I said, I'm not in the business of maximizing the return for the next quarter. I am in the
Yes.
business of perpetuating the company, of long term. I have to do business this year and pave the way for business next year and the year after. And that's much more difficult than just maximize results. So we have to be forward looking. What is society thinking?
What I love about Fabio's story is how clearly it shows that purpose and performance are not mutually exclusive. In fact, they can amplify each other. It's bold, it's smart, and it's deeply human. Now, let's switch gears to finance, a field not often associated with inclusion or equity. But that's exactly what Durreen Shahnaz set out to change when she created the world's first social stock exchange. Here's a moment where she reflects on the power of money to transform if it is in the right hands.
And then I went around and I found this small bank which was giving these loans, and no one knew Grameen. Literally,
Yeah.
no one knew Grameen at that time. It was the really early years. I mean, and yeah, I went and interviewed with Professor Yunus, and I remember he said, "You'll never make it here. You're coming back to Bangladesh after a long time. You will just not make
Yeah.
it." So he put me on probation,
Yeah.
sent me to the kind of the most backward of the villages,
Yeah.
and I survived. And I remember it was like a big celebration when I got my off my probation to get my salary of $90 a month. I still remember. It was, but it was again, it was one of those things which I feel that
Yeah.
was a defining moment in my life, and I
Yeah.
really felt that it was the right thing, the right decision. What was interesting for me to see is using finance not just for financing, but also for behavioral change. So all of a sudden you had these women who doesn't did you have to understand, like women just had no rights, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
and all of a sudden they actually had money that they could actually go and buy a cow, and these are tiny loans, and then sell the milk and pay the loan off. And so think of that, it's just not financing, but they're actually learning how to be disciplined about getting money and paying it back. They're
Yeah.
learning about the fact that they had to memorize these 16 decisions, we used to call them, and it was also something that all the borrowers, we would have these big meetings and we, came up with them. So it was things like, again, the societal and behavioral change, things like you would have to promise that you will not take dowry for your son's wedding. And if you have a daughter, you're not going to pay dowry. If you have girls, you will actually also send them to school. You will plant vegetables around your house. So it's kind of, again, all those things you'll say, oh my God, like, really? But it's really that, which is all of this are basically those basic, societal need that just wasn't there, right? Um, so it became a part of kind of that norm, which was we wrapped the, kind of their loan financing around. And what
Yeah.
was so interesting for me, and I talk about this in my book quite a bit, I remember for me the most powerful moment, because I spent a lot of time in the villages, because also I was looking at things, when their branches were defaulting, what was happening, because I was working on this
Yeah.
big financing round for the bank. And I remember the biggest thing for me was, and you have to understand what I would always think about. So at that point, I was what, 23, 24, around that age. And I saw women of my age who already had kids who were like 10 years old. And
Wow.
they
Yeah.
looked like they were 40, like the,
Yeah.
basically the life has really drained everything out of them, right? The hardship, the poverty. And I remember, like, for me, the most powerful thing was at Grameen, again, because we have such a high literacy rate, everything was with thumbprint, right? And what at Grameen, one thing that I really was very proud of, um, we would actually make them sign their names. You have to understand, these women don't know how to read and write. So we
Yeah.
would sit there on the ground with a stick and teach them how to basically sign their name. And also, what was interesting was the moment a woman had a child, she
Yeah.
was no longer called by her name. She was called, someone, so and so's mother. So
Yeah.
for me, that was also very powerful, that you are 14 years old giving birth to a child, and all of a sudden you don't exist. You don't have your name anymore. So what we
Yeah.
did was we would say, no, you have to sign your name. You don't say Fatima's ma,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
you don't say your Fatima's mother, or
It's you.
Rafiq's mother.
Yeah.
It's you. What's your
Yeah.
name? So
Yeah.
literally they would have to, like, they would, like, have this look on their face, almost of fear. My own name? Are you sure? I'm like, yeah, your name. You have to write your name. So I would write their name, and then they would actually practice it. I would, like, hold their hand. It's like, how you teach a child to write. Um, and then when they would actually sign their name eventually, on that piece of paper, every time these women would cry, and I would cry with them. That one moment.
Now, after hearing about her work with Grameen Bank, Durreen shares how she transformed financial markets to make them more inclusive, and how she launched the Women's Livelihood Bonds to create a large-scale social impact.
So basically, when I started IX, now it's 16 years ago, it really was to make the financial markets inclusive. And also for me, it was very important that, again, as we talked about for the last hour, all my experiences are coming together. And I
Yeah.
think what we have done over the last 16 years is really have been able to create, various instruments, platforms, technology, etc., that has, really been able to create the right kind of interventions and products and services that has, I would say, in some ways normalize the sense of inclusion. In other words, we put these big bonds every year in the market called the Women's Livelihood Bond. When we first went out in
Right.
the market, everyone thought it was crazy. They wouldn't invest because they're like, what, women? Like, what? But we normalized it by creating these really funky structures and using high finance, as I like to say, for low markets. So, what is really sort of beautiful about what we have been able to do is be able to use, real finance and go beyond just sort of saying, oh, I'm putting a fund together and we'll just do investments in a few companies, but really saying that we are really about not just, doing little things here and there, but changing a system. And that's
Yeah.
exactly what we did. And in some ways also it was quite crazy, to be able to do something like this in I would say in a region where everyone's quite risk averse.
Yeah.
So we like to, whether people will admit it or not, but I think in Asia we like to copy than to actually innovate. Um, so I think this was really sort of, I can imagine it's like, innovation on speed. So, and being able to sort of convince people whatever it took, um, and to make that happen, and we did. So I think where we are now is we put over $500 million we've invested in the market over the years. I make it sound very easy. It was really very difficult, but
I'm sure.
that's for,
I'm sure it was. Yeah.
yeah, kind of
K-
another day. But yeah,
Yeah.
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Would you mind, Doreen, I think, again, double clicking on this women's livelihood bond? I think you've been issuing already 7 bonds, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So can you walk us through an example in one of the countries? Because I think beneficiaries have been both across South Asia, but also sub-Saharan Africa. So how does it work? What does it mean to
Right.
invest as an investor $1 or $1 million, whatever? And
Yeah.
what kind of social economic outcomes you get in return of that? And how do you measure success? Big question for
Yes.
investors.
So basically what we did was, so just to kind of, the premise of the bond really came from the fact that, we have this we created a stock exchange with the Mauritian government. We also created an exchange without trading, that we run ourselves. Um, and we saw that the SMEs kept on coming back to us, for more capital. And again, the only way you can also kind of participate on that platform is you have to be working with women and climate. And they kept on coming back to us, to basically our network of investors and all that. So that's when I said, okay, well, why don't we actually create, again, in financial world, this is what created the 2008 financial crisis, which are the CLOs. I said, how about using that for good, where you pull together a group of assets and then create layers of de-risking and then sell it to the market. So that's sort of the premise of the bond, kind of on the financial structuring side.
Yep.
And what we have done is, so you can imagine, each of these bonds every year when we are pulling them together, they're multi-country, multi-sector. So in a same bond, you have entities from India, you have entity from Kenya, you have entity from Philippines, Cambodia, etc. And then you have these entities are in multi-sectors. They can be from financial institutions, microfinance. They can be from agriculture, from clean energy, etc. So what are we
Yep.
doing? So we are basically in the process, creating this intense diversification on the country level, on the sector level, which actually helps in the first layer of de-risking. And then on top of that, we have 2 layers underneath that in the structure. We have a guarantee, and then also we have a first loss. So this is also where we pull in various governments to play a role. The US government comes in for the first loss. Like now we have the guarantee coming from the Swedish government, and we pay them. It's not free. So it's not
Yeah.
Trump.
Yep.
Trump can't say they're giving anything for free. So we're actually paying the US Treasury. So
Yeah.
basically for us, this all creates a very solid structure. And the bond actually gives, so for example, if it's $100 million bond,
Yep.
it'll have a tenure of 4 years, and the coupon payment we're giving to the investors will range from I don't know, from 4 to like
Yep.
7%, depends on the market.
Depends.
And that's a good return. That's a very, very
Absolutely.
good return. So we also have a lot of, so now what has happened is the bond, as it gets getting bigger, the
Yep.
institutional investors are coming. And again, as you know, Jean-Philippe, they control most of the capital markets. So they're
Right.
coming and actually buying most of the bond. So they buy like 99% of the bond. So these big investors. So for them, they actually see this as something that is giving good return. They see this as obviously having an impact in the markets, that they can come in indirectly. They can't come in
Yep.
directly, but they can come in through this bond. And then also they like the fact that, what we have been able to prove, which is the deeper impact you have, the financial risk goes down. And we measure
Yeah.
that impact and all of that. So, and we
W-
share it.
Would you mind just giving us an example again of a country across countries, of one of your first maybe bonds in terms of success and achievements? What does it mean in terms of maybe millions of lives that you've changed, women empowerment, whatever it means on the ground for the people, for the
Yeah,
real
yeah, of
economy,
course.
right, and the society? Yeah.
Yeah, of course. So for example, say in the Philippines, there's an organization called Negros, for women. This is, this island called Negros, which initially their economy was based on sugar plantation. So when the price of sugar went down, obviously things, the whole economy collapsed, and that's when these women started actually, getting these small loans from this organization, to start up businesses. But again, Negros for women could not, um, access financing. So that's when, say, with us, they came into our first bond, and subsequently, I think, two more times, where basically we provided them with the financing, which was then on lent to the women in Negros, in this island in the Philippines. And then all of a sudden, just through that one organization, this, you know, obviously several thousand women had livelihood. And then, of course, each one of them have a family size of, 6 to 8 people. They were all
Yeah.
impacted positively. So you can see like the ripple effect.
Durreen calls herself a defiant optimist, and you can feel that energy in every word. She challenges the status quo with elegance, courage, and a deep sense of mission. Speaking of optimism and provocation, no one embodies that quite like John Elkington, known as the godfather of sustainability. In this next segment, John reflects on his early experiences in sustainability, particularly how he navigated the challenges of engaging with the business world during a time when environmentalism was often viewed with suspicion. He shares his unique approach to bring sustainability into the corporate sector and the role public pressure played in shifting perspectives.
It's funny because nowadays people say, I'm an environmentalist, and that's a badge
Yes.
of pride. Back 50 years ago, and where I was very unusual among environmentalists and Greens, because I was trying to engage the world of business. And if you were engaging business at that stage, so this is the 1970s, they quite literally thought if you were an environmentalist, you were actually a communist. I mean,
Communist.
these things were completely interchangeable. But to your question, to me, one of the absolute turning points in my thinking was 1970, when Earth Day happened, and I happened
Yes.
to know the founder of Earth Day, Dennis Hayes, now quite well, and but at that time, they got 20 million Americans out on the streets protesting around environmental issues. And because of that, when Richard Nixon took over as president, he had no option but to set up the Environmental Protection Agency, launched the National Environmental Policy Act. All of these different things started to happen because of this real sort of public pressure. But nonetheless, for many years afterwards, people in business just felt, we really don't want to talk to these people. If we let them in the
Yes.
front gate or the front door, they'll just go for our throat.
Yes.
And so a lot of my early work was trying to relax people, and maybe I was a Trojan horse in some ways. I mean, I was male, I was white, I had a sort of a sensible accent, all the rest of it, and I could talk as if I was an economist, or as if I was an engineer, or I was an accountant, or whatever. So a lot of that early phase was just getting people into a conversation, because that hadn't existed before. One tiny final thing, which is when I came to the field, I worked with, for example, some of the founders of the World Wildlife Fund, Max Nicholson, Peter Scott, and so on, and they were conservationists. Now, before conservationists, active management of habitats to preserve species, there was preservation. Let's lock up areas, the world into national
to
parks.
protect. Yes.
Then came the conservationists, then came the environmentalists, then came the Greens, then came everybody, the sustainability movement. And many of these different groups really didn't know how to talk to each other. And when I think back to the conservationists I work with, they were often hunting, shooting, and fishing people, as we would say. And the environmentalists were absolutely none of that. And so the conservationists would look at the environmentalists and say, you're anti-growth, you're anti-profit, you're anti-business, you're anti-everything. And it wasn't entirely true, but that was, again, a set of internal divides.
Yes. Coming up, John talks about his role as a diplomat, breaking down silos between corporates, regulators, and environmentalists. But he reminds us that higher education, and most importantly, the voice of youth, are non-negotiable in this transformation. And in a very unexpected and beautiful twist, he turns the table to me and asks me, why did I choose to lean into social environmental change, and how am I working to empower diverse youth to reshape our world for good?
So I think I've often felt that part of what I do is like a diplomatic function, that I'm bringing the outside world into business at whatever level that happens, but equally trying to bridge between the different parts of the activist movement so that they better understand what each other is trying to do, and wherever possible work together. And also increasingly now trying to bring all of that experience back into the world of education, universities, business schools, and and just an example there. I mean, for 30 years now, I've lectured at Imperial College in London, the master's MSc course, and about 3 months ago, I got a request from Imperial College to, now called Imperial. I don't think it's great branding, but that is the fact. To come and launch a new school of sustainability. And I almost clutched my head in my hands and thought, that's 20 years too late. And then they told me what they were actually doing, which was they're setting up a school of convergent science. And in that, they're looking at health, they're looking at security, they're looking at space, and they're looking at sustainability. And they're going to pull all of the different resources of at least this is the thinking,
together.
Different departments, breaking silos across Imperial, and making these people work together on solutions, systemic solutions in an integrated way. And that I love. And so bridging back into the educational world, and then bringing some of the younger people into the world of business and all the rest of it. That I think is a key part of all of our tasks.
No, I think it's very strong actually to bring a multidisciplinary approach. I mean, with environment, and not segregate it as a silo, as a piece of culture or of veneration, but embed it into all the disciplines that you teach in schools.
Where did this whole agenda first sort of present itself to you? Were you working with Microsoft at the time, or where did that happen, and how did it happen?
Well, it's a great question, John, and you are certainly turning the table now to me, which was not expected. It's okay. Tell the truth, certainly, working in such an exciting company at the core of the innovation ecosystem in the world, which is Microsoft, I had the opportunity to see the power of innovation all across the world, traveling the world for 40 years of my life. And I could see the way that innovation could be actually translated into social progress, into environmental outcomes as well, in a more sustainable way. And in all that time, I also love and enjoy always to meet with social entrepreneurs, impact entrepreneurs, this generation of people we are talking about, who are basically building new types of companies which are balancing together a strong direction in terms of financials and economics, absolutely, but in service to to a cause, to an issue, to a problem that they want to solve. And that inspired me. And then later on, about 10 years ago, I created a foundation called Live for Good now in my country, where I'm spending now, 50% of my time more spending time with youth between 18 and 30 years old, thinking about this new generation of companies and leaders as well. I call them positive leaders, hence the name of this podcast, Positive Leadership as well, to think about the future differently with a mindset which is a growth mindset, which is a mindset about the way each one of us can have a positive impact in the world in whatever we do. It could be running an NGO, it could be a volunteer in a sports club, it could be a consultant, it could be a CEO. You can have a positive impact around yourself with your behaviors and with your energy driving others with you to make the change where it needs to happen.
And just a very quick question. What's the mix in terms of young men and young women, in terms of the younger entrepreneurs and innovators that you're working with?
In the community I've been working on, John, it's been 50-50.
Okay.
It's been, and I didn't have to put any kind of a quota at all. It happened to be demographics of the country.
I asked the question partly because in innovation, you often find it's skewed male and with AI and things like that. In chief sustainability officers, it's heavily skewed female. So that's where the question came from. But it's
no, absolutely. But I think what I found out is in this universe of social entrepreneurs, impact entrepreneurs, you get actually a much broader access to entrepreneurship than the traditional startups ecosystem by far. And my goal now is actually to go far beyond just the gender, is to also include and invite all kind of diverse backgrounds to entrepreneurship, which we do actually with disadvantaged kids, with people coming from suburbs or rural areas, and give them access to the ecosystem, to the tools, to financial means as well, to build their own impact enterprise. John reminds us that being serious about sustainability doesn't mean being sullen. Sometimes what we need is a little gentle rebellion. Next, let's go to Japan, where Yoshito Hori saw his country struggling with disconnected leadership after a national crisis. Rather than complain, he decided to create something new, a summit that would bring together leaders from every sector to build a better future.
When I came up to my personal mission, which is creating people capital knowledge, ecosystem people capital knowledge for creation innovation. And that is contributing to societies. It's not to make money. And therefore, we don't go public. We have even donated our businesses and money for the foundation of our university, graduate school of management. So from the beginning, my purpose was not to make money, but more to bring something into societies for innovation and creation by educating leaders and also creating industries. That was my whole purposes. And however, in 2006, I went to Davos for World Economic Forum. Mm-hmm. I realized that Japan's presence was going down the hill. And when I was at Harvard, it was Japan's number one. It was a time of bubble, and there was a time of Japan bashing. And then there was a time of Japan passing, and people started saying Japan's nothing. So I was so shocked to see that, and then I started to feel that my efforts were taking too much longer, because educating leaders will take time to get results. Creating industries will take time as well, but it may be faster than educating leaders. However, you have to fix the system of the country itself, which is like the government and also regulations and also all the legal and the entity. And then I started to think about copying the model of World Economic Forum, multi-stakeholder gathering, inviting politicians, business leaders, as well as academicians, and also social entrepreneurs and all the athletes, everybody get together. And then we call it G1. G1 stands for Globe is One. And then group of one. So it's like a
Group
G1.
as one. Yes.
So it's not G7, it's not G20, it's not G0, it's G1. It's a group of one. And also our generation one. So therefore we should get together and think about how to make Japan a better country. In 2009, we started with only about 100 members. And now, out of them, like Prime Minister Abe and Prime Minister Suga, Prime Minister Kishida, Prime Minister Ishiba, all the members have become Prime Minister. And most
That's
of
impressive.
the ministers are from G1 as well.
Yeah.
And then billionaires as well as the business leaders as well. They all come from Japan. We worked hard. We all come from G1. We worked hard to make Japan a better country. We even wrote a vision of Japan as we call 100 actions. It's not 100 proposals, it's 100 actions that we have to take to make Japan a better country. During the time of 2005, 2006, and now 2024, if you look around in G7, plus all the like leading countries like G7 plus Russia and China, which is like Security Council members.
Yes.
9 countries. I think Japan is most stable in terms of society, in terms of politics, and in terms of economy, and we are becoming more attractive because more inbound coming in, and we are becoming one of the example in G7 plus 2 of the leading countries. And G1 is all of us are making efforts. I think this is like a very interesting characteristic of Japanese people, that not even politicians, but also other business, private sector leaders get together to think for the sake of society, and then to make their time, to sacrifice their time and also money,
and
to devote their time and money to make the region and also country a better state. And part of it is like I started Kibo, you mentioned. Kibo stands for hope in Japanese.
Hope. Okay.
Right after Great East Japan earthquake, you saw tsunami and Fukushima, and that has inspired me to start Kibo, which is initially rescuing the devastated area. But later on, we have decided to create a social impact investment to support social entrepreneurs. And that I have decided to do. Even I've started to work for Mito, my hometown as well.
What strikes me in our recent story is his clarity of purpose. He saw walls and chose to build bridges. That's leadership at its best. Finally, we close with a story that moved me deeply. Laurence Tubiana, the architect of the Paris Agreement, takes us inside the tense final hours of negotiation, where conviction, courage, and love for the planet came all together. Before we dive into the excerpt, I want to briefly apologize to our non-French-speaking listeners, as this part is in French. However, I felt it was essential to include this segment because it deeply resonated with me. I hope you can still appreciate the emotions and insights Laurence shares, which are truly universal. But if you are really not comfortable with French, feel free to skip ahead and join me 5 minutes later.
D'abord, moi je quitte Copenhague assez évidemment très déprimé, mais en disant on aura notre revanche. Le cynisme a gagné, c'est vrai, les pays comme ça ne se font pas de pression les uns sur les autres, mais on aura notre revanche, enfin ceux qui pensent que c'est un problème commun et pas un problème juste de développement économique comparé. Et il y a eu 2 grands moments, un moment presque au milieu à la fin, bon c'est aussi, j'avais gagné la confiance des uns et des autres en faisant beaucoup de préparation. Il y a eu beaucoup de préparation.
Énormément de voyages, j'imagine, et de rencontres.
Et aussi de réunions.
Ouais.
On a fait ce qui ne se fait plus, et je le regrette, des réunions très fréquentes des ministres à Paris et dans certains
pays aussi,
pays, mais surtout à Paris, où on réunit les 35 à 40 ministres des pays qui représentent les différents groupes de négociation, pour les familiariser avec les problèmes, les options qu'il va falloir prendre.
Les éduquer, quoi, quelque part aussi.
Voilà, parce que à la fin, c'est eux qui vont piloter. Et s'ils sont pas informés, ils ne pourront pas prendre la distance politique nécessaire pour aller de la négociation technique qui s'en faire toujours.
Dans
parce que les gens sont toujours dans les détails.
Mot, etc.
Et il faut qu'ils puissent comprendre et maîtriser ces détails techniques.
En fait, partager le contexte commun.
Voilà. Et donc l'information et l'apprentissage, pour moi, c'est vraiment des règles de travail.
De base,
et on réunit, grâce à Laurent Fabius, ces ministres, presque 4 fois, je crois, avec vraiment des séances de travail sur le fond, bien organisées. Et donc, ils arrivent très équipés. Ça, c'est important parce que il faut comprendre, la méthode a été très, très utile. Ouais. Et puis aussi beaucoup de contacts avec les ONG pour les transparences qu'on était en train de faire, pour que justement elles donnent une narration positive. Réfléchir sur la narration, un moment important qui se passe très avant Paris. Un des anciens secrétaires exécutifs de la Convention Climat, une grande amie, qui est toujours une grande amie, qui est aujourd'hui la vice-première ministre espagnole, Teresa Ribera, et puis il y avait encore 2 ou 3 autres personnes, me disent à ce moment-là, ils faisaient un peu un pack de soutien, il faut que tu écrives aujourd'hui le communiqué que tu veux à la sortie du 12 décembre.
Fameuse annonce du communiqué de presse.
Voilà. Et donc, on commence à y penser très sérieusement en disant, si on gagne aussi la narration...
Ça sera quoi
comme économiste, vous connaissez... vous êtes dans l'économie, vous savez comment les anticipations conditionnent les comportements. Et donc, la fameuse self-fulfilling prophecy, l'idée que selon ce qu'on pense arriver, va arriver, je me dis, il faut que la self-fulfilling prophecy, c'est que ça va marcher. Donc, c'est ça le communiqué. Ça, je l'ai déjà en début 2015.
It's incredible. Our strategic thinking and careful preparation were central to this process. But for now, let's dive into one of the most emotional and pivotal moments of the negotiation, where Laurence won the trust of the key stakeholders, even when facing deep skepticism.
Les moments dans Paris très importants, ça a été d'une part d'avoir gagné cette confiance, et notamment un moment que je n'ai pas raconté encore à personne. Il y a un gros conflit entre le groupe des 77, animé et présidé par l'Afrique du Sud, et une remarquable ambassadrice, Madame Disseko, qui a une carrière diplomatique à continuer après, et qui est incroyablement méfiante. Et puis, je vais la voir. Et je suis très émue parce que c'est une femme forte, parce que je sais qu'il faut que je gagne sa confiance. Et il se passe quelque chose entre nous, où elle me dit toute sa méfiance de tous les personnages qui sont autour d'elle dans cette négociation, et le fait qu'à la fin, elle me croit.
In moments of intense conflict, it is the human element, the trust, the empathy that can turn the tide. And this is a real powerful example of how relationships play a role in such monumental decisions.
Donc, il est 5 heures du matin, je leur ai dit, je ne vous donne pas le texte puisqu'on va le donner à tout le monde en même temps, mais voilà ce qui va vous plaire et ce qui va vous déplaire dans le texte. Et je donne les différents arguments, les différents sujets évidemment centraux. Et puis, silence de mort.
Personne ne réagit.
Rien, glacial. J'attends une minute, puis je dis
Comment silence à une minute?
C'est très long, très très long. Et je leur dis je peux rien faire d'autre. J'ai pas mieux, je peux pas faire mieux. C'est ça, ou je peux pas faire mieux. Et donc, voilà, c'est pas ça. Je peux rien faire d'autre moi-même. En tout cas, voilà, on est à la fin. C'est pas possible. Silence de mort. Glacial, mais vraiment glacial. Et là, je craque de fatigue. Les larmes commencent à couler d'épuisement. Et là, un miracle. Je pense qu'ils avaient déjà décidé, mais l'ambassadrice vénézuélienne, très vocale, se lève et vient et me prend dans ses bras. Et tous les autres me rejoignent et en disant, on va te faire confiance. C'était un moment que je n'oublierai jamais de ma vie.
Quel moment exceptionnel. On peut faire confiance à l'humain, finalement, à l'empathie.
Et c'est ce qu'on a vu dans l'après-midi quand le coup de marteau de Laurent Fabius a scellé l'accord, la joie de tous les gens pour se dire, en fait, on peut y aller. Enfin, on peut être des humains aussi. On n'est pas seulement en train de représenter notre pays. Ça, c'était magnifique.
This, for me, is the essence of purpose-led leadership. Having a powerful vision that helps others believe in the impossible. As you just heard, leadership that serves people on the planet is not soft. It is actually bold, it's ambitious, and it's deeply needed. Each guest today reminds us that leading with purpose is not about sacrifice. It's about alignment. When we align our business, our values, and our impact, we unlock something truly powerful and very special. So this summer, I hope you'll take time not just to relax, but also to reconnect with your purpose. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you for being part of this positive leadership community. We'll be back early September with a new season of exciting conversation that I can't wait to share. Until then, enjoy your summer break, take care of yourself, and stay inspired.